I can't believe it's another Wednesday. Wednesday, jeez. I can't believe it's Thursday. I don't know what happened to Wednesday. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Men's Radio Station, www.mensradiostation.com. And you can hear us on Twitter. You can see us on Facebook. And please come along to the Men's Radio Station YouTube channel. Smash the subscribe button. Hit the like button. It takes you like 3 seconds, and it does us a huge favor. Anyway, this is one of my favorite hours of the week. It is the ABC of CBD with the extraordinary Mr. Ollie Mammon. This is week, what, 35?
35. I can't believe it.
35. We're going to have, when we get to a year, we might have actually met in person by then. You never know. And we're going to have we'll have a special show. No idea what that is, but we will have a special show, Ollie, to celebrate 1 year of the ABC of CBD. Thank you for joining in. As always, I'm just a passenger here, but I thoroughly enjoy the ride. Ollie, over to you.
So I want to make a little point before we move on with the show. When we first started doing this, Russ said to me, he goes, yeah, so what's your idea? Once a month, once every 2 weeks? I was like, no, I want to do every week. He's like, are you sure you want to do every week? And I was like, I want to do every week. If you want to give me 3 times a week, I'll do 3 times a week. Just give me the hour and I promise you I'll make it eventful. And Russ was like, I don't think you quite understand how difficult it's going to be to find guests. You know, like finding a new guest every week is really hard. Don't get me wrong. It has been really hard, but it's so worth it. And I love the fact that every week.
The quality of your guests are just jaw-dropping. They're just fantastic.
They're incredible people who have basically, they've taken their, they've made their life's work their passion. Okay. Yeah. And that's what these, like every single one of our guests has taken their life's work and turned it into an absolute passion. And there is so much energy and so much desire to do better. And that's one thing I found from all of our guests is this. Like no one's ever plateaued. Everyone always wants to do better than what they've done. I want to say thank you to everyone over the last 35 weeks.
And also, they're so articulate. They're also smart in all their different fields. It doesn't matter if they're a farmer or a manufacturer, whatever they might be, or a patient. They're so articulate, and they tell their story in such a way.
They really understand. They understand what they've been through.
Veronica Curran, good evening to you. Thank you, wherever you may be. All right, Ollie, perhaps we should have a little word from our sponsor.
Yeah, let's do that, and then we'll get on with the show. I'm sure you've heard before that good quality CBD needs to be really, really expensive. This is the new view of CBD, a product created by users for users, a product at an affordable price, available everywhere, at any time, at the simple click of a button. Just CBD and MCT oil. No additives, no preservatives, and no flavor enhancers. It's a simple subscription-based service. The cleanest possible CBD delivered to your door for the lowest possible price. Your product, your rights for the lowest possible price.
I'm sorry, I still love it when the guy opens the box. I don't know if he was expecting like a delivery from KFC or some burgers or something, but it's his look of absolute delight and pleasure, which always cheers me up.
He's excited because he's getting CBD, and the pain he's been in for the last 6 months has disappeared.
Yeah, it's going to go.
It's magic.
It's going to go. I've become a ridiculous apostle for you, Ollie Mammon. Every time someone says, I've got pain with this, I've got a pain with that, I say, you need Oliver Mammon and the zinc.
Do you know what the problem is? The problem is using words like apostle make me think Jesus complex. And the problem is you are kind of encouraging. No, it's incredible having.
I think it's your hair, Ollie, to be honest with you. It's the hair and the beard.
I tell you what's incredible, Russ. What? You know, when you first met me, you had no idea. And now you really are.
I've only spoken to you and seen you on a screen. I've never actually met you.
Let's rephrase this. Before we connected, you had no real idea about this industry. And now, pick up your vape pen, show everyone what you're consuming. Exactly. Russ is vaping CBD now to deal with his stresses on a daily basis.
I'm very impressed.
Exactly.
I'm horribly impressed. So my dog's on CBD. I think you got to walk it as well as talk it, right? So my dog, I put CBD oil, which Ollie put together for me to cure her tummy problems. She's been great. Thank goodness. She's 12, so we've got to be careful. She's the center of the universe, obviously. And then I couldn't sleep, so Ollie made me some sort of rollerball stuff.
And the drops.
And drops. And then I said, well, look, at the moment I'm really stressed because you're running 2 radio stations and writing another book and other stuff as well. He said, I'll send you some vape pens. I have no idea what they are. I'll give them a go. Jolly good they are. Well done.
It's all about application technology. You use the right product in the right way, and you should be able to cure or treat your ailment. Anyway, on with today's show. Our guest today is a dude called Dylan Hibbert, okay? He's awesome. Or you're going to meet him now. Dylan is involved in the British American Football League. Okay, our conversation today is around the topic of CTE. Now, CTE, we're going to get into it. It's a traumatic brain disorder which occurs from competitive sport where athletes might get hits. Now, there's been a lot of research over the last few years around cannabinoids and brain trauma and cannabinoids and brain inflammation. There's been a lot of uptake by specific sporting worlds and cannabinoids. So, for example, the UFC allows the use of CBD. The NFL has recently also allowed that. So I'm going to do my introduction.
UFC's allowed it.
Yeah, so UFC allowed CBD consumption, I think 2.5-3 years ago.
Whoa,
So UFC is very, very big in the you could call it the acceptance of CBD consumption. But then there are other sports out there as well where players have these hits, and there's a lot of research to show that cannabinoids can help people with these inflammations. I'm going to give my little introduction as I usually do. It's written as I like it. And then we're going to bring on the guest and we can start with a proper show. So over the last few weeks, we've been joined by cannabinoid suppliers, cannabinoid prescribers, patients, advocates, and activists. Last week, Rebecca Moore slammed the door on the link between mental health and cannabis, which has been at the forefront of public knowledge for several generations. It's been the first and foremost reason in the social control of this plant. Cannabis will make you go crazy. But last week, we found out how it's basically a lie. Through research and logic, Dr. Rebecca Moore, a trained and well-accomplished consultant psychiatrist, explained that the suspected correlation between mental health and cannabis has been manifested in the most part, and that only a few very unlucky people have this predisposition to mental health issues stemming from cannabis. Dr. Rebecca Moore was trained and educated to believe in the demonized view of cannabis, like most other doctors, but her position kind of made her, and over the 20 years, she realized that a lot of what she had been taught wasn't true. Her life experience being on the front line of mental health issues showed her the truth about this plant. Hopefully, that little truth can start to shine a bright light on this medical space that has habitualized the demonization of this plant. Cannabis is not what doctors and politicians have said it is for all of these years. Cannabis, when used correctly, could even help individuals suffering with mental health issues. This is something that I've been saying for the last 35 weeks, but last week, Dr. Moore confirmed it. Anxiety, PTSD, insomnia, stress, and many other issues can be treated through specialist cannabis consumption. So we all know now that cannabis and the brain, they don't work badly together when using them properly. And it's very important moving into today's episode that any of the misconceptions you had about cannabis before are not there anymore, because we're about to start talking about how you can potentially treat mental ailments, and mental problems with cannabinoids, brain issues with cannabinoids. And it's very important that if you have this idea in your mind, this demonized view of cannabis causing harm to the brain, you're not gonna, you're not gonna believe when we tell you the things which we're about to tell you today and over the next few weeks. So it's very important you listen to these new pillars of information which are emerging through this show and through other platforms, because this reconstructed view of what cannabis is very important for us moving forward. Today we're going to talk about another brain issue and a brain trauma. It's called CTE. So it's chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Encephalopathy. Find it very hard to pronounce. It refers to a degenerative brain disorder that is most often caused through repetitive head trauma. This ailment can only be identified post-autopsy and post-mortem, which means that people who suffer from this ailment, they don't know until they've suffered from it, until they've succumbed to it. And it's very important to know about these things, because it's a real issue which a lot of people suffer with, and no one really talks about it. The issue is becoming very prominent topic. Is it becoming a very prominent topic of discussion in the American football space, the boxing space, the UFC space, and now also rugby. All of these sports where athletes take serious hits. Our guest today, Dylan Hibbert, is involved in the UK American football industry. He is a cannabis patient. He's an active cannabis user. He's an advocate for cannabinoid use in sports recovery, and he's very well educated on this idea of CTE. Head trauma is nothing new, but CTE is a rare disorder, and it's not that well understood. The effects are not normal. Sufferers cannot be diagnosed during life, and the causes of CTE are not fully understood. There is no cure. The effects of CTE include impaired cognitive function, emotional instability, physical problems. However, the effects of the trauma are known to occur several years after the trauma actually happens. So it's not like you hit your head and tomorrow you wake up, you're in a bad place. So you hit your head and you wake up in 10 years' time and you're suffering. And it's a massive issue, which, as a world, we really need to get a grip on, because, the people suffering are people who are suffering because of our desire to be entertained. That's why they're going through this pain at the moment. With the emergence of this topic and ailment, there has been an increase in conversations regarding CTE and cannabis consumption. Some research into concussions, brain trauma, and cannabinoids has shown promising results for inflammation reduction and general recovery. Many athletes have started to speak out about their use of cannabis as a post-sport recovery product, and athletic organizations around the world are now encouraging and promoting the use of cannabinoids as a recovery tool. The World Anti-Doping Agency removed CBD as a banned substance about 2 years ago, which means that if you're a competitive athlete in the Olympics or in majority of competitive sports internationally, you are legally allowed to consume CBD, and you will not fail a drug test because of it. There is now a dialogue surrounding a leniency towards other more controlled cannabinoids as well, which is also something we're going to get into today. So let's welcome on Dylan, and let's start this conversation about cannabis and CTE and competitive sport.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Absolutely.
Right. Thank you very much.
Really appreciate it. Sorry about the little bit of a long introduction there.
That's all right. I completely understand. It's nice to be interviewed, if I'm honest. I've done a lot of the interviewing myself, so thank you very much for just even reaching out and even considering me.
Dylan went out, he did the gardening, he did some shopping, he popped down to Tesco's, he washed the car, he came back. He had things to do. It's fine.
So basically, it's one of those subjects which I'm not that educated on.
Mm-hmm.
It's something I want to bring to the, I want to bring it to everyone's attention, but it's not something I'm fully educated on. It's not something that I'm involved with. It's not something I or anyone I know has ever suffered from. But it is something which you know about, something which you know people who have suffered from, and it's something which you've really educated yourself on the subject. And I thought before we move into this, it's very important we all get an education around it. And thank you so much for coming and joining us and doing that. So tell us a little bit about you, Dylan. Tell us about your journey, how you got into American football, etc., etc. Being an English boy, you're a little bit far away from, the average laces out situation. So how did you get involved?
So obviously you get into the sport through Facebook, as it is in the sort of early 2000s, as it is Facebook was it is. And I got involved for it that way, as to a friend put a flyer up, said to turn up at a game. I turned up at the game, got quite good at it. But a little bit further forward is I have epilepsy. So before I even start playing American football, there's already, hang on, let's have a think. But the problem was, I was quite good at it when I was younger. And then it got to the point where 2012, I got this phone call, top 150 kids to go to the David Beckham Arena, and we did it. And a lot of those guys there, I can say this now, have gone to the German national standard, which is like the highest you could go in Europe. So this is not terms of like a few kids, English kids playing this sport. These are the actual guys that have gone and got paid, and they can still play today. Wow. So then it come to when I was at university, my epilepsy came back, and I got put on the medication, and that medication, sodium valproate. So as to the understanding of the medication now, Matt Hancock declared it doesn't work. So we go back to where when I was using it, I was just using it because that was what I was told to do. But it then became a point where I started to feel like I was becoming ill, like genuinely becoming ill from a depression test, funny enough. And this is one of these things you go, right, so what would you do? So I looked at him and went, well, it's clearly something going wrong and it's not me. 100% I feel fine.
What were your symptoms, Dylan, if you don't mind me asking?
A low mood, not very active. You're sort of very much degrading, like deteriorating, if that makes sense. So my energy output in the day, over the period of time, you would see it deteriorate. And then it came to the point where I wasn't well. And then basically you've Charlotte's Web. So Charlotte's Web come out online, and I then started to go down my own route, understanding that, and then going, okay, I've got epilepsy. I'm 21. I can kind of see the science here. I can understand it.
Let me just drop a little explanation here, Russ, in case you're thinking what Charlotte's Web. Do you remember we had Chris Stubbs on the show? And Chris Stubbs was talking about the first CBD tincture he ever made for a girl called Charlotte Fiji.
Yes, I did.
Okay, so Charlotte Fiji, God rest her soul, she's passed away now. Charlotte Fiji was an epileptic child. I believe she lived in Colorado, or her family ended up moving to Colorado. Her family ended up getting in contact with Chris, and Chris formulated the first ever drops for her. And then a company called the Stanley Brothers, they ended up working with Charlotte and developing this mass market product around her and around this formulation which Chris had developed. And Charlotte's Web was the first mass market CBD product which was available internationally, and it is like the product that made everyone realize what CBD could actually do.
Right.
Okay.
Got it.
Sorry, carry on.
No, that's it. No, thank you, Ollie. That's exactly the explanation as to what I saw and understood. So then obviously you do a bit of research and then you see CBD. But then from what I kept coming across was THC. And this is the part I'd like to declare. Like, everyone has their own different uses of this plant. I'm not advocating for that or anything else. But the best way I found to consume it was through tincture. So a 1-to-1 tincture in the morning and at night was a much better stabilizer for me than the medication I was on. So I stopped taking the medication outright. 100%. I just went, no, because I know that I'm feeling better. I'm running around more. Ironically, I was playing for my football team as it was. I was playing
normal football or American football?
American football. So it's the same point. So then I'm playing better. I'm in a much better mood and all of these things. Then my recovery is outstanding. My recovery genuinely.
Can I jump in here? Let me jump in, Dylan. Because this is of great interest to people watching and listening all over the world. When you said, right, that's it, I'm not taking the pharmaceutical recommendation, did people go, ooh, this is not a very smart move, or were they supportive?
Okay. So I'd say there's two different ways I looked at it. I've seen that medication as a kid, and I've seen it help, and I understand that how it works as a child. And then it got to this point, and I'm there like, I've taken a test, and I can tell it's not me. It's like, what faith can you sell to me? What can you sell to me? I've done this. I feel much better. My recovery's better, and the product you're pushing is now, as we fast forward to now, you can't give it to people with epilepsy. So it's one of those ones where you can't really tell them. There's no point you're there to make to me. So I kind of said, I'm not using it at all. And there's nothing we're going to do this. And then I just kind of stopped doing it. I just carried on as normal as it is to now.
And you were using, as in, it's very important we say this, as in the cannabinoids you use for yourself, you source from the street, or you're on a medicinal, you have a medicinal card?
There would be, as you would do, you'd have to do it both ways, wouldn't you? So you'd have to find it, regular access. So you've got to find it that sense. But here's a nice, interesting point, is that I was at university, which is Theresa May's constituency. And if you look at what her relation is to cannabis, I was in a very much ironically in a place that was kind of doing it for how can I put it? support you could see in the understanding of the product was very much years ahead, if that makes sense. Because as you look at what Theresa May and what her partner does with British Cannabis, it makes very much sense as to what you could see the forward thinking. So when I've had to sort it and locally and then the medicinally way through understanding American and such, I kind of could see that there's two differences. Because obviously in America, they're so far ahead, they would be ahead. But in the UK, it's the same thing as I'd like to explain it as Formula One. Well, we seem to make all of the parts and ship it around the world.
Yep.
So that seems to show a point that we seem to have people in this country that know more than anyone else. So it's very much like I can appreciate and understand America, but we seem to be doing very good as ourselves, but we're still trying to figure it out because that's how good we are. And if you look at it, the NFL and the CTEs and the sort of the topics of inflammation and such, CBD at night, sedative, CBG, CBN, very good nighttime stuff. I understand. Please correct me at any point, Ollie. But they very much, as soon as I found those, after getting into the medicinal understanding, I was like, right, well, that's better for me. Because I know
a million percent. I understand what you're saying. And, you know, the one thing is like so many patients in the UK, you've almost had to find this out by yourself. You know, you were on a road that wasn't working and you found that cannabis worked for yourself. Let me ask you a question quickly. Were you a recreational cannabis user before?
No, until I was 21.
Okay, fine. So you started using cannabinoids when you found out about Charlotte's Web?
Yes.
So therefore, so you were suffering from epilepsy, and I want to ask you again, what age were you diagnosed with epilepsy?
As a child, I've got it. As a child, I had it when I was 7 until I was 11 or 12.
Did you have to? And you used to have a lot of seizures?
Yes. If you look at it, the tablets, then obviously my pituitary gland led to me gaining so much weight. And then when I went to school, I then lost all that weight. So it was one of those situations. If you look at my brain, sort of how it was overloaded, then it needed to rehydrate, then dehydrated. Then suddenly, as it is at 21, as you say with America and how far ahead they are, it made total sense why they said at 21. It makes total absolute sense from what I've understood and seen people that have used it 10, 12, 14, as you see in the news and such. It's like, I completely understand at 21 because you have a different mindset to 18. Because when you're 18 and as to when I was 18, what was the biggest thing on telly? Geordie Shore and Jersey Shore. So what does that mean you do? You just go out drinking every day. And then as soon as I then understood CBD, cannabis and everything like that, if you were to say to me at 18 or 21, if you had a choice, I would never have touched alcohol in my entire life. Because the same point what it does to epilepsy and how you're draining your body and such, it's a no-brainer for me. It makes total sense to never touch it ever again.
No, I understand that.
You were saying that you, when you were playing, your recovery suddenly dramatically improved.
Yes.
Talk us through that.
So, as you would say, like inflammation genuinely. So, genuinely, like inflammation in my body, like stiffness from after a game, wasn't as much. A little bit more mobility. As you would say to your head, I would have a much better night's sleep. So that was half of it. And waking up and feeling better was a lot of it. And as it is to university standards now, well, where I started, that team doesn't exist anymore. But as to explain, as we say, about big hits and such, the year before I joined my university, and I'm going to shout a few people out from my sport, Dwayne Watson, right? He is the size of an NFL running back. And if any proportions, that is, what is he doing here? No word of a lie. What is he doing here? He should be there. Now, you understand that everyone is different shapes and sizes. Now, you're not used to going up against that. That's the same in rugby with Jonah Lomu and all of these big guys. That's not meant to be here. That should be in the arena. That shouldn't be on a muddy rugby pitch, catching a ball knowing he's got a 10-yard run up. It's very much those sort of things where, like age groups wise, that you still get these kids that they should be 4 age groups above because of just general size, but then it's not their fault. So it's kind of
just naturally big.
Yeah, it's kind of like Godzilla.
Look, as a 13-year-old kid, I mean, I was like 5'10" and 300 kilos. Okay, I mean, like, trust me, I was like bigger than any. I was bigger than most of my mates' parents when I was a kid. Okay, like both ways. And it's I completely agree. And I used to play like football. All right, I wasn't very good at it. Actually, I sucked. I was terrible. I'm like the worst football player you've ever seen in your life. I used to play football because that's what you do on Sundays. You know, you go and play footy. And I mean, I wasn't very good. I wasn't very coordinated. And more often than not, kids would literally bounce off of me. And that's what happens. You have this little, really super quick, incredible football player who's, you know, 5'1", like he should be at age 13 years old. And he comes crashing straight into basically a brick wall of me. And he would fall to the ground, start crying. And I'll be like, oh, mate, I'm sorry. Do you know what I mean? Because like, you don't know what to do. But once again, it's like, you can't, like, how... I understand what you mean by kids being of a size which is too big for their age group. So carry on. My bad.
No.
But you can't. It's a slight digression here. But you can't penalise them. You can't say, well, you know, you're enormous, but you're only 12 or 13. You can't play. That's not fair. It's not his fault. It's nature. So you got to go with it. I get the complexity, and I'd never thought of it before.
No.
Interesting.
It's one of these topics in sport where we're in the UK now. If you used to go to the teams we've got in this country, there's two teams in London. One team has sent 6 guys to the NFL, give or take. So that's development schemes or pathways. But we're talking people in this country can go and play in the NFL. But then this is the same thing with Sunday League football. So you've got a team that produces guys going to the NFL, and they're playing against the team from a small town that are there just for the fun and games. Now it's a car crash because and that's not based on the problem. It's rise to the standard. It's pretty much like that. And that's my understanding and looking at the sport. But it's the same point. It's like, if the standard's not there, what do we do? Because it's car crashes. You train up athletes to be Formula One cars and become absolute just freaks of nature. And then you give them a 10-yard run up at someone. Well, what do you expect to happen? It's
going to destroy that person.
It's going to hurt.
And that's not putting people off. It's the same thing like as if you join in the army. Like with any discipline, like boxing or whatever, you have to have a mentality for it.
Yeah, but in boxing, they're never going to put some, you know, like 35 kilo welterweight against some, 350 kilo heavyweight. It's not going to happen. You're never going to see Manny Pacquiao fighting. I don't know. I don't even know. Like Anthony Joshua. It's not going to happen. Do you know what I mean?
The early stages of the UFC where they'd have like some kickboxer fights. That was just
so. I want to move on to this, okay? Because like I say, like we're around halfway through the show, and I really want to talk about CTE. I want to do it. So, as someone who's suffered, so you suffer from epilepsy. You're in a sport where you're getting hits on a regular basis, which means that your general cognitive function is constantly being questioned by yourself. Why? Because you already have head trauma, you have this epilepsy, you have this ailment already, and then you are getting hit. All right, so first of all, you're a lunatic, all right, for putting yourself in that position. It's very important that someone says it. No one said it yet, so I'm going to say it. You're mental, okay? It's very important I say that. When was CTE first brought to your attention?
It never was brought to my attention until I saw the Will Smith film, and I saw situations where, like Kansas City, Dwayne Belcher repeatedly said to the team he had bad concussion injuries, and he shot himself in the car park. So it's very much one of the, you don't really think about it, but it's the same thing with boxing. Like there was the gentleman, I can't remember, it was Chris Eubank, and he went to hospital. And there was Chris Eubank's son fought a guy, and he had to be put in a coma just on obviously brain trauma in the fighting a guy that clearly was just too good for him, and it was just a punching bag. So
I heard about this. I heard about that. So I only found out about it maybe 3 months ago. I was watching a documentary. All right. And it was maybe it's over lockdown. So over the last 18 months, okay, fine. I feel like everything was yesterday. But I mean, like over the last 18 months, over lockdown, I was watching a documentary about cannabis. And they had maybe a 10-minute snippet in this documentary about CTE and about NFL players who started consuming cannabis and old NFL players who are talking about how if they didn't consume cannabis, they think they would have gone the same way as some of their colleagues who were not here anymore.
Right.
And it was the topic really kind of just dropped on me like a ton of bricks. And I remember we spoke maybe a month ago, Dylan, and it was and it kind of re-erupted everything in my brain. I was like, this needs to be spoken about. It's not known about. Now, I was speaking to a friend of mine in America, okay, actually a guy who, like Chris Stubbs' brother. And basically, we were talking about this show, and I was talking about how I want to do something on CTE, and I have got you coming on. And he was like, yeah, you know, how under the radar was that? And I was like, what? He goes, I was like, you're in America. Are you not here? He goes, it's been kept so under the radar. No one's spoken about it. It's not one of those things which is mentioned. Players are left to suffer by themselves. And it's a serious issue, a serious trauma that no one's doing anything about.
No, Ollie, I'm sorry. I just got to step in. Are you saying that the use of cannabis was kept under the radar, or the trauma and the trauma and the injury was kept under the radar? Yes, it was, because of course it's the very epitome of sort of American sport, isn't it? Yeah. You know, it's everything that you kind of aspire to be. You want to be the big jock, and you want to be out there and everything. You don't want to know. You can have horrible traumatic head injuries from this thing.
You're going to end up in a wheelchair and not being able to hold your bladder and pissing yourself at the age of 45 years old. Do you know what I mean? And then you'll die at age 47. Why? Because you hear voices in your head and you decide to put a trigger in your mouth. I mean, it's like these things need to be talked about, Russ. You know, like people need to know.
And that's why the Will Smith film, which Dylan's already alluded to, it was very important. Although it seemed very niche, you think, well. You know.
I've just lied to you all, by the way. I just had a little memory. I just had a little stoned memory. Okay, so I met someone called Samaj. Now, Samaj used to be the head of security for my friend's dispensary in California. And Samaj was maybe a 6'6" black dude, okay, and he used to be a football player, and he brought up CTE to me, and he mentioned that he would never let his kids play football because of the damage it does to the brain. And I never understood what he meant. You talk about the damage to the brain. He never mentioned CTE, but it was about, you know, like, people don't know what happens to football players. You don't know what happens to someone who doesn't make it. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. You know, I'm sorry, man. He goes, no, you don't know. You just don't know.
And that's Dylan, it's interesting because they are wearing helmets.
Yes, there's a few things.
Tell us this story, Dylan. Tell us the story of you and your helmet and the hit, the one you told me.
So I'm one of those guys that I'm not one of those guys that a bit of reckless abandonment. I'm one of those when it comes to this sport. And as to explain again, epilepsy, you gave me a helmet. I'm one of those people that probably I'd say. I still play. I still want to play and still do. Is probably test the integrity of how much you could put one of these things through it.
Right.
And I say that wholeheartedly because of when it comes to the game, like it would be the army, you got to do what you got to do to make the team win. And that's not in the sense of that's a very old rhetoric to what it is now, if that makes sense. It's very much like you must do your job, all of that sort of situation. The sport's changing. Like in the tackling technique that what it was before. It's now head is out of the way of the ball. So what I did was not what I was taught. It was what I knew would get the job done. So I'm not saying at all this is the right technique at all. Okay. Very much I did what I had to do because it was the only thing I saw.
Of your own volition, it was your decision alone. You weren't being instructed or coached to do it this way, right?
Okay. Yes, I just want to make all of that clear. And that every coach that has been to me and who I coached the correct technique. I didn't do this. So I ran head first, face into the ball carrier, into the ball and him. And I got up and the face mask was hanging off. So as you're saying, like a motorcycle helmet, very much clearly I definitely had some sort of brain injury because what would you expect? I took a very hard run up, right? Then this is the insane person is why Ollie would say I'm a bit of a madman. I went to the sideline and said, can I change my helmet, please? I got to go back on. And that would be one of those hits that I would like to explain that I remember all of it. So as to say a concussion, I couldn't say I had one, but I can remember the first time I played rugby. Now the very difference from rugby and American football, when you kick the game off in rugby, no one can stand in your way. But in American football, someone is trying to stop you from getting to the ball. Now, as it is, the first time I played rugby, I'm used to someone finding me, so the alertness and so forth. Same technique I had, head first, straight into the person. 100%, this would be when I was in sixth form. I definitely must have had a concussion, because I remember looking at the scrum half, definitely 10 minutes later going, what am I doing? So these are those things, like, without a helmet, what are you going to do?
But even with a helmet, it's very important to, like, make it like a little analogy. If I take an egg and I wrap it in bubble wrap and I put it in one of these helmets, I then hit it with my car at 130 miles an hour, hate to tell you, that egg is fucked. Sorry for swearing. Okay. And it's very, very important, you know, like these helmets that that protect you, but your brain is still shaking around this helmet. Yes. Do you know what I mean? Like, fine, the bat might not break, but the trauma is still there. Yeah. It's a little bit like wrap yourself in bubble wrap and then get your wife to smash, or your husband to smash you with a cricket club. You're still going to feel the cricket club. By the
way, on men's radio, it's probably not the thing to do.
No, but you're saying you're still going to feel
because your brain is moving at a horrible rate inside your skull, and that's causing much of the bruising.
Yes,
it's just kind of it's a bit mental. It's a bit mental. So do you reckon that movie, the Will Smith movie, really brought it to attention globally? Do you reckon it was like not spoken about at all before that?
So obviously before that, if you look at the situations, some of the players, Mike Webster, David Jurison, one guy, he committed suicide and said, please use my brain for the for research and such. But this is when the game is still figuring itself out. And you got, as it is now, people are faster than what they were 20 years ago. So it's trying to be safe with these collisions. So very much to what's happened before and to what CTE and how it brought to light. Yes, it is something that is important, but it's something that we have to figure out at a pace that makes sense. So
I understand that.
It's become now, tackle football is not introduced until you have done, like the same thing with boxing and such. You couldn't go straight into a ring and spar unless you've done some sort of training. And it is, again, tackling techniques. So there was a YouTube video on TikTok or whatever of the youth football, and it was the same situation. We're saying, what are these two people paired up with? Short run up, fast speed, collision. Obviously, it went viral. What are you doing with these kids? Well, it's the same point. What are you doing here? It's like a bobblehead. Like it's so heavy, this helmet. Like, you got to understand, it's 2-3 kilos. It's not army.
Is it?
Yeah, but it's not.
Wow.
Army.
I always thought they weighed nothing. I thought they were like carbonate type things.
They are the information and technology that's getting out there with these helmets now is second to none. Even now, to flag, so 7-on-7, they wear scrum caps that they've now got pressure sensors that if a guy gets a hit of a certain contact, it will beep like on his chest plate on this thing, and then he'll have to sit out and get a test. So like the NFL, it understood, and obviously, as anyone would, damage control, completely respect that as a business. Like the NFL, if you look at the NFL and we talk about numbers and why this would be so kept under wraps. This NFL season didn't go on last year during COVID. The industry would have lost $900 million. $900 million just on broadcasting. So that's one of those things. Like,
that's without the merchandise sales and, of course, everything else. That's just broadcasting rights.
Yeah.
It's a huge industry. Absolutely, it's a huge industry. So, is it becoming much more acceptable now? Because what I'm seeing as an outsider, I mean, you guys are right in it. You with sport and Ollie with his companies and everything. But does it go against the grain to say no? This shouldn't be happening because it should be the prowess of the player, and suddenly they're taking cannabis. So this can't be right. Is that one of the issues?
This is okay. So this is where it's been quite interesting. Where I would say it's very much one of those things. If you cut the head off it, it will form two, and it's very much as it would be with the NFL. When you look at some of these players, like I'll just give you some guys here.
Okay.
Percy Harvin said he played high his entire career, and this guy is absolutely.
So wait, now we're moving into cannabis consumption and post-sport recovery by American football players. So just throwing it out there, little banner.
Yeah.
Go.
So as we're talking about So looking at it for going against it, Percy Harvin did that his entire career. Yeah, and he got drug tested, of course, and then he would get banned, but then he'd come back and he'd perform. You then had a guy called Josh Gordon, whose nickname was Flash Gordon. Now, as to explain an average, so in a game, you shouldn't get more than roughly 60 to 80 yards per game, give or take, based on plays, maths and such.
Mm-hmm.
He had a span of like 4 games where he averaged 160 yards.
Amazing.
So, and it would be before every game, he would consume cannabis, drink 2 shots of alcohol, and then go play. So that the entire time is again, it's that, well, he's still going to use it anyway, but you got to understand and regulate it for him. If you're not regulating it, what are you going to do? You're going to fine him. But then if he just keeps performing, you're going to have to bite the bullet. Because if, like, we'll go forward to now in the NFL and epilepsy and advocacy, Justin Fields, number one of the first round draft picks, has come out during his conversations before he joined his team, if that makes sense, like an agent conversation. They found out he'd been suffering with epilepsy. So now the next point is this is one of those young kids that's going to get a massive Instagram, TikTok following. If he comes out and says he consumes cannabis for his epilepsy, that's opening the tap. That's opening the dam.
And what will it do? Because we're dealing with huge numbers. I mean, NFL, yes, it's a sport, but it's a gigantic industry. It's a business. The bottom line is what it's all about, as with most of these things. So what would it do to, here's a future star. He's going to be a very big deal. Does that then scupper his chances? Or do people say, oh, okay.
America is different right now because America, cannabis is medical in America. You've got 15 states which have fully legalized it recreationally. You've got 15 states who have fully legalized it medicinally. And you've got 15 states where basically they're on the cusp of, it is illegal, but it's not illegal, and it's illegal everywhere else in America. And in the next 10 years, it will be legal here. So, I mean, like, cannabis in America is very much accepted and very much tolerated. One thing which I've seen, I just want to move on to say, there's been maybe 5 studies which I pulled, just simple studies which have been over the last 20 years about cannabis, all done in America, cannabinoids and traumatic brain injuries. So there was like I said, there have been 4 or 5 studies, one in 2014, one in the year 2000, one in 2018, and one in 2016, all about how cannabinoids can help reduce brain trauma. So you're living in this country where all of this research is coming out. You're living in this country where epileptic people and people who suffer from PTSD and other forms of mental trauma are consuming cannabis. You have this idea that cannabis and mental health are not inextricably linked. So what happens is you already have this foundational platform for cannabis to be accepted. Now, one thing which we were speaking about with Dylan is that the NFL have allowed off-season cannabis consumption, right? So now if you're in the NFL, out of the season, you're allowed to consume whatever type of cannabis product you want. During the season, you're allowed to consume any type of CBD product. The UFC have allowed pre, during, and post-fight cannabinoid consumption of CBD, and also UFC fighters who are not fighting are allowed to smoke. They will not get banned from the sport for the consumption of cannabis. Usain Bolt turned around and said out of Olympic season, he consumed cannabis. So what happens is you've got the World Anti-Doping Agency who made the same rule. You can consume as much CBD as you want whilst you're competitive, and outside of competitive moments, you're allowed to consume cannabis. You've got that swimmer. Who's that? Michael Phelps. Michael Phelps is one of the biggest advocates for cannabis usage. You would think that a swimmer who needs his lungs would not smoke.
Yes, I find really surprising.
Massive cannabis advocate, all about how it helps him with his sport recovery, and he wouldn't be the best swimmer on the planet if it wasn't for cannabis. And then you've got everyone else. All right, I don't even know everyone else, but there's everyone else who does consume. And based on this documentary I saw, the amount of cannabis consumption in the NFL is actually insane. especially in states where cannabinoids are legal. So if you've got, Miami-based teams, Colorado-based teams, California-based teams, like the Oakland Raiders, if you think they are not smoking up
Dolphins, blah, blah, blah.
But the Oakland Raiders, Oakland's like, cannabis capital of the world right now. Like it's crazy there. So, I mean, are you telling me the Oakland Raiders are not? Of course they are.
The Oakland Raiders now, Ollie, they are now the Las Vegas Raiders. So
they moved to Vegas.
Yes, they moved to
Vegas. I know
Vegas.
nothing about sport. I told you this I told you I know nothing about sport.
So these are the things as to understand. They get it, right? They're slowly getting it. Now, if you put an NFL team
and Vegas as well, Vegas is a completely recreational state.
Yes,
you can what there are more shops selling. There are more shops selling cannabis in Vegas than there are places to gamble, which is mental.
What?
Yeah, there's more places in Las Vegas to buy cannabis than there are places to gamble.
And look at that for a life decision.
Crazy, right?
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about you, Dylan, as we get into the final quarter of the show. What did you physically feel with, because I love to bring it down to a human level. You get bashed up. What real difference did it make in terms, give us like over days, we be talking weeks to recover from these events?
So I've had it where I've had 1 game a week, 2 games in a week, and I've had 3 games in 1 week, one time.
Ooh.
3 games
rough.
in a week. So Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday. And I can say that'll break any man. That'll break any man. No, and that's not about me or anything like that. That will get you.
My back's hurting just thinking about it, dude.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, can I ask a question? I know pretty much the square root of nothing about sport apart from Formula One. So, with the American football teams, there seems to be about 30,000 people in a team, and then they have endless meetings, and a number go on, and then there's all these other guys coming on. Is it the same in England, in the UK?
It's definitely 100%. I'll say this as I was saying to Ollie, that we are going in the right direction. Like plans for a semi-professional league in 2 to 3 years. As to the standard that we've got, we have a school that sends kids to the NFL. Mm-hmm. When I say the NFL Academy, it's these kids are going to Div 1 NCAA colleges.
Some kid from Hackney just got into some kid from Hackney is like he basically just won the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure I heard that. Yeah.
If you're playing a football team with a football team, there's 11 of you, and they don't swap around during the game. That's it. If you get injured, then you're down to 10 men or 9 men or whatever. Are you in? The difference I'm trying to get is: are you on the field all the time?
There's a few things of it. With rugby, there is a lot more collisions, but I would say the impact isn't the same speed. What do I mean? Why do I say that?
Why is that?
But, okay, so with rugby, it could be pass, get 2 yards, fall down, recover, reset. With American football, it could be a guy's going to run 4 yards, run as fast as he can, catch it, try and outrun everyone. If you go with just on angles and speed, like physics in American football, the ability to go as fast as you can, just knowing he's going to go to that point, if that makes sense, it can be very much.
No, I'm not entirely. I'll be honest with you, I'm not quite getting it.
So, with the hits in American football that I've seen from rugby, is very much 100 miles an hour, 4 seconds. But you're talking that man is running as fast as he can to catch that ball to outrun everyone. So give it a bit more context. American football, he could run 1 step, catch the ball, have to run 99 yards to beat 11 people. Yep. But then once he's down, he's down. In rugby, it's the conservativeness you could do with your body, knowing you got to play 80 minutes, compared to if I tell you you're only going to touch the field 15 times. So as to the execution and the speed and all of those things, is second to none. Does that help?
So from Russ, my limited understanding, I think will make it easier for you to understand. So in American football, you've got 2 teams. Okay, you've got hear me. You've got the offensive team and the defensive team. Right. All right. It's done on stop clock, which means that when the ball's not in movement, the game's not happening. Now, what happens is you've got guys who probably have 3 or 4 seconds to get as far as possible. Now, what happens is they're not running with a ball. They're running without a ball. And then the ball gets launched at them and their aim is to try and catch it. Yeah. So what happens is they're not thinking about anything else except how am I going to stay alive and how am I going to catch this ball? Whereas in rugby, you've got that little bit more of it's more of a team game. First of all, everyone's allowed to hold it. Everyone's allowed to throw it. And it's very much you attack as a team forward, as opposed to little Marta is going to run down the field, get a rocket launched at him and could end up dying because he gets attacked by 15 members of the other team. Why? Because his defensive players are not there. So the impacts are a lot harder and everything is a little bit more, I want to call it rigid. It's a bit more of a rigid movement as opposed to rugby where there's fluidity. Also, if you take out a rugby player who does not have the ball, you're off the pitch. If you take out an American football player who doesn't have the ball, it's just football. I can literally drop kick Dylan in the back of the head and no one will say anything. Why? Because Dylan was going to hit my player and I'm allowed to take out Dylan. And that's mental, which means that also in rugby, you're only ever expecting the hits when you have the ball. So you're not going to be walking down on the sideline, take a 5-minute break, and next thing you know, you come and just get taken out by 3 people, not only by 1, by 3. Why? Because they decided to do it to you. In American football, they'll do that. The hits are insane. I actually like watching the YouTube videos of hits, but now I know what they do to people. I'm going to watch it and feel a little bit different. But I mean, I used to love watching those hits. I'm like, man, look at those hits.
Dylan, I guess the big question is, should they be wearing helmets? Despite what you've said, and I've taken on board everything that you and Ollie have said, should they be wearing helmets to prevent this in rugby?
There should be something. Don't know what that form is, but if you look at it as to say 7-on-7 rugby, so 7-on-7
7-a-side, yeah, 7-a-side.
7-a-side flag. These guys are wearing, all of them are wearing scum caps. Period.
Skull caps, right?
So,
scum caps with yes,
and so it would make sense.
And they got these pressure things. You're saying.
So it would make total sense if you look at it for ice hockey. Like every player wears a helmet, but the things it doesn't make sense is then you got hockey. They don't wear one. Why not? It makes it doesn't. It's one of those.
Ice hockey, you're falling down on ice, which is crazy hard, and you don't want to get hit in the head by a puck because that's gonna.
Fine, let's rephrase this. Lacrosse in America, they wear gear to protect themselves. Lacrosse in the UK, they don't. That's mental. If you play lacrosse in the UK, you do not have a helmet and pads. You play lacrosse in America, you do. So as in, I'm saying, there's something mental. There's something mental. One thing I wanted to ask, we've got 8 minutes left. Has CTE been seen to be a big issue in rugby? As in, have any rugby players suffered with this, or has it not been discussed in the UK?
I would say for me, is saying from American football, I don't know enough about anyone in rugby. If you was to ask any guys, it would be George Croyce and Dominic Day from 4-5 CBD. They would tell you exactly for rugby. But from what I could say is, it'd be very easy to see someone having multiple concussions in a rugby game than it could be an American football game, because you get ones, as they call it in the film, like a dinger. So it's not like a complete bell rung. It could be like, if that makes sense. Like you could, in rugby, if someone got hit in the head and he stood up and he's moving funny, everyone in the stadium would stop, check he's okay.
Yeah.
And one more thing. As a competitive athlete, okay, and as someone who plays American football, who consumes cannabis and who has found that cannabis is the best rejuvenating recovery product for them. You found your 1-to-1 tincture helps the most. What dose are you taking? Do you know of your 1-to-1
dosage? I don't go any more than 1,000 because I'd work it out as 100%, if that makes sense. Fine. I would, in my own head, is if I don't go any more than that, because if sorry. No, it's okay. So I'm saying, so you take your dose of a cannabis product. Would you ever stop and move on to something else? And what would you recommend? And would you recommend other athletes to try CBD, try THC as a post-sport recovery product if they haven't? Yes. So this would be the last pitch. Is we don't have the same testing in the UK as America. So in terms of anti-doping and such, and we have been completely backwards with the laws on it. So as to getting people to speak about it as athletes, my God, if we was to be a stock market on athletes, and one of these athletes said something, watch that stock tank, period. Then if you look at it as an asset, how much those people are worth to teams, very difficult. Because over in America, the free agency understanding in sports, I can sign with who I want, talk to who I want. When you're over here, it's your employer. You get sold. See you later. It's very much like, I would say, the market needs to be regulated 100%, and it needs to be understood. People as it would be for me, I'd like to advocate for epilepsy consumption and understanding of it because of who I am. And that being said, is what I found from Charlotte's Web to what I know now, and to see how the technologies and such have changed. It's something that is going to happen. And if it takes one athlete, one musician to come out and say it, well, you're opening the gates coming. Like, it's going to happen. Someone is going to be caught doing something in some way, shape or form. Like, you got Kevin Durant, who's an NBA player. He was getting out of a car and cannabis was falling on the floor. Did anyone care? No, that's Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant needs to do whatever he needs so he can play, if that makes sense. It's very much depending on the person's sort of platform as to how it'd be accepted. But if you are looking to understand it and consume it, I'll be happy to help any athlete I can, because obviously it's still new understanding it, the methods and such.
Amazing. It's very important because
I'm thinking of Dennis Rodman.
Yeah,
you know what sort of drugs though, Russ, they give these athletes? I mean, like, I'm just going to go back to the movie Varsity Blues. Have you ever seen Varsity Blues? Yeah. Okay, yes. So it's like a 90s what's it called, coming of age movie, but it's all about American football. And in that movie, you see, like, you know, these are high school football players, all right? So these are it's not even professional, it's not even college, it's high school football players, and you've got, you know, like the medic injecting them with steroids and injecting them with things to stop the pain. And, you know, you think about, there's so much covering the pain as opposed to trying to remedy the pain, and there's so much trying to cover up, you know, problems with players as opposed to trying to remedy these problems with players. I feel like it's like we're letting people down. And, you know, like you said, you end up with players who are in such a bad way, they're so far gone, they end up killing themselves or just dying from, you know, unknown, unestablished illnesses. And it's very sad, you know, because a lot of these people are only doing what they're doing for our entertainment. You know, they wouldn't take those hits unless their fans were like, mate, that hit last week was incredible, I want to see more of those. So these athletes think they owe us.
Well, yes and no. I mean, they're also getting paid. So
I know they're also getting paid, but
they want to win, and they want to be in a winning team, and they want to
lot of people get paid though. A lot of people get paid a lot of money to not end their life in a very, very despicable place. No, and I'm saying, like, I'm all for them. I'm all for them putting on the show, but at least take care of them. You know, like, if there is any chance that cannabis can help this problem of CTE, it should have some energy put into it. Why? Because these players are giving people what they want. You know, like, people want to see these players perform. We should at least give these players a life. Do you know what I mean? Like,
access. Some of them may not even be able to provide or get access. If you look at the European leagues, and you've got Americans that have been using it as their form of medication throughout the entire season, they go to a state and they can't access it. Well, there's a few things I guarantee. His mood's not going to be the same. So
his performance won't be the same.
You're not getting the guy that you paid for. And all he wants is just a bit of medicine that's just going to get him so he can go to sleep, wake up and feel some energy and get on with the game. It's very much one of those things that it's becoming accepted because more people are going to be doing it.
When do you think, as we wind up, when do you think this will be, rephrase it, Russell, do you think it'll ever be completely acceptable?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
It has to be.
Absolutely.
Well, it has to be. There's too many people. There's too much following. Look at
just the opportunity that Ollie's gave me to just highlight it. Like, you have to understand, I've had to tell everyone, like, I'm doing this, just to let you know, if you lot are okay with this, I'm just going to continue to put on my content out. So it's very much the same point.
Has anybody said, "Ooh, I'm shocked"? Dylan?
I'll find out when I check my DMs after this. It's very much.
I see. That's really. Will you let us know?
Of course,
please, because we have a pretty big social media footfall, and it's very interesting. I when we started this series, I never thought Ollie would be talking about this. I find it absolutely fascinating. What an interesting area.
It's such an important subject just to touch upon. I know that's what we've done today, and it might have come across as quite a scattered episode, but I feel like there are points which, over the next year or two, as information starts to come out more, like everyone will know that the seed's been planted. At least people are starting to look out for it. Russ likes closing off the show, so I'm going to let him do his last 20 seconds.
Well, Dylan, thank you so much. It's been a real, not just an education for me, but I'm sure listening and viewing all around the world. Ollie, as always, thank you for finding a terrific guest. This is the ABC of CBD. It's exclusive to Men's Radio Station. We'll be back 6 o'clock next Thursday. Until then, take care.